and welcome to this week's edition of Kikao, your weekly interactive agricultural program focusing on the big issues facing that sector on the African continent. And in a short while, we'll be having that conversation with experts on just what is the role of science, technology, and innovation in improving agriculture and food security. My name is Joe Agayo. First, let's set the stage for you with a cross-section of views from around Africa.
We don't have extension officers from the government, ama the county, ama the national government, ambao anatupatia mawaida.
Kuna wakati tuliahidiwa watakuja kututembelea ili waangalie udongo, hiyo mchanga yetu iko na acid mingi sana, kwa hivyo haiendi pamoja na ile mimea tunapanda.
We know what we have. We know what we lack. We should streamline our research activity towards what we lack so that to get what we want.
Let's now join Dr. Canisius Kanangire, the Executive Director of AATF, with this panel of the week discussing the place of science, technology, and innovation in agriculture here in Africa. Agriculture is the main economic activity for several countries in sub-Saharan Africa. The sector contributes about 15% of the total gross domestic product of the continent. Across Africa, the agricultural sector is expanding very rapidly to meet the increasing demand for food and good nutrition. Various studies have demonstrated that science, technology, and innovation hold great potential in increasing the productivity and prosperity of farmers in Africa. But progress in translating innovative products into real impact at the farmers' level has been relatively slow, resulting in persistence of poverty and food insecurity on the continent. On Kikao, I will be speaking to policymakers, experts, and practitioners on the state of technology and innovation on the continent and how to accelerate progress. I'm Dr. Canisius Kanangire, the Executive Director of AATF, and my guests here today are Dr. Martin Bwalia, the Director of AUDA NEPAD, and Dr. Francis Nangayo, who is the Head of Regulatory Affairs at AATF. When we talk of agriculture, commitment, declarations, decisions have been taken to improve agriculture on the continent, to try and reach food security and improve nutrition of Africans. Where do we stand today when you look at the status of agriculture and the provision of food security on the continent?
I think it's good to start by saying that there is obviously massive progress from where we were, say, 3-4 decades ago. But again, the dissatisfaction comes from the fact that we definitely could have done far, far better than where we are in terms of agricultural performance, in terms of the value of agriculture, and even sometimes our mindset and understanding of why agriculture, what is agriculture. You did mention that a lot of our communities, especially in rural areas, are deriving livelihood 100% on agriculture, and we call it like that. You also did mention the issue of agriculture contribution to GDP. Probably that's where we need to stand. What do we mean by agriculture? What are we referring to? Because agriculture, when I get out of my house as a smallholder farmer growing some food crop on a quarter of a hectare, and I do that essentially for nothing more than food in my stomach, then we need to do something. Because we even have had policies that sustained that kind of farming, where you're giving people 1 bag of fertilizer for a loan, 10 kg bag of seed, then there's no commercial value in that process.
So the current situation, the current status of agriculture in Africa is not yet a commercial one. Mostly in rural area, we are still at subsistence level.
There is massive still subsistence, both in the level of the kind of crops we grow, what we do with them in terms of consumption, processing, and all that, and even the intention, because the majority of those we are calling smallholder farmers are basic subsistence farmers. There's a majority of them that can move and be motivated to grow more than just what they need for the nuclear family, and begin to produce into the complete value chain of food and agricultural systems.
This calls for a kind of transformation and change of mindset in the farming industry as a whole. And this is not new, because in 2014, in the Malabo Declaration, they were already talking of the transformation of agriculture and make it a real engine for development. How did they envision that transformation, which would be generated by the Malabo Declaration and all those commitments?
There was mention of transformation in Malabo Declaration in 2014. And I think that I must hail that bold step to think about African agriculture from a lens of transformation. Indeed, I think as a political statement that pointed in the right direction. But transformation has to be intentional. It has to be followed by action. I think the Malabo Declaration is on paper very, very clear. And what needed to be followed is walking that talk. For instance, if you call the war cry, it will not be a full-scale war, and it will not do anything unless you fire a bullet in the right direction and they follow up in an organized manner. So the Malabo Declaration was a starting point. I think we needed to take you from that and live towards those commitments. And I think since Malabo Declaration was a political statement, the leadership of African countries needed to follow through when they go at country level to see that appropriate allocations, if not even in just one fell swoop, even if it is a graduated one, are committed towards the direction of Malabo Declaration.
Africa, since 2001, has taken very serious commitment. Our leadership is very clear on that. We want agriculture to be transformed. We want Africa to feed its people, but we are not yet there. We will take a pause and a break, and when we come back, we will see the key factors which could probably unlock the potential and see that all those political commitments could be implemented. Welcome back to the Kikao taking place here in Kigali, Republic of Rwanda. If Africa had adopted and used technology and innovation in agriculture, then we would be able to produce enough food for our people. What does it mean here, bringing in technology and innovation?
We actually have got lessons about that. When fertilizer was introduced decades back, the message, the narrative, there was that nobody will starve ever again. We have had several instances where technology is introduced and you say, this is the end of the problem. Mechanization, it was the same thing. Climate smart agriculture, it was the same thing. This is what we came up also in the national dialogue last year. We went to 48, 49 countries in the United Nations-led food systems national dialogues. The countries were coming up to say, is this another list of priorities of what we need to do? We have several. We have Malabo, CAADP Malabo. We have the SDG. We have Agenda 2023. So what will another list do? Many times, we have ventured for technical solutions. which are important, but they are not the whole. They are not even sometimes the main issue. Because if it was just science, technology, and innovation, and you put it there, and the solution is there, we would not be sitting here. We need to come back to why are these technologies, innovations, some of them working very well in some circumstances, have not caught wildfire, gone like wildfire.
Why, if science, technology, innovation, which are there, are existent and accessible, unless they are not very much accessible to the farmers, why are we still lagging behind? Why Africa cannot have the same performance as agriculture in other countries?
That comparative lens that you brought in has driven the picture quite clear that African agriculture, you look, has stagnated like for decades, with productivity per hectare averaging just 1.1, 1.5 if you're doing very well. Yeah. And if you if you compare that with other developing regions of the world, then you see areas like Southeast Asia that were more or less having the same indicators like us, having made quantum leaps going upwards with the time. They must have done something to their agriculture. They must have adopted some innovations that transformed their agriculture. And that doesn't answer the question. It just shows how different we are. Riding on that bold political step of transformation, I think the other twin element that we need to bring in is then to say with the political direction going this way, to match that, we need to then consciously go out to adopt agricultural productivity enhancement technologies.
Doesn't it call for a certain level of prioritization of which technology?
The continent has recognized that there was real issues that need to be addressed in terms of delivering results and transformative results as at that. And one of them was to begin with the issue of leadership. We need champions. We need visionary individuals that are able to create a critical mass of interest and commitment to drive the process. It's not always downhill. There will be many, many instances where you have to go uphill, and that visionary commitment should enable us to cross those hurdles.
Now, we talk of leadership. We talk of policies. Add regulation, I know you like regulatory frameworks. All those are like enabling environment and shaping the direction on what we want to do. But science, technologies are many. You are talking of resisting to climate change issues, responding to the challenges of insect and other pests.
I don't think that is the level prioritization is something we need to address anew. I think that many studies have been done before. And even before making maybe this matter rather complex, if somebody talked about the threat of climate change manifesting itself in the form of weather variability, I think that does not need any lecture. When we were growing up, we used to think that maybe that's just a theory. But we see it. We see frequent and prolonged droughts, disrupting agricultural production, and so on and so forth. And even if a country were just to cherry pick and say, for the next 10 years, we as country X in Africa, we are going to prioritize climate change, followed by perhaps animal production or animal industry, agro-processing. In other words, trying to do our agriculture with value addition in mind rather than just generating raw material, and focused on that as flagship pilot examples, you would then take stock at the end of that time and show that the transformation we have been talking about is not alien. It takes this kind of form. And there are technologies that can bring about climate-smart solutions in crop production.
I will invite you to a break, and after the break, why then, if we know the solution and we know the challenges, why we don't address them? Welcome back to the show. In the previous session, we talked about the key prioritization of technologies that Africa could take to improve its agricultural performance. And it seemed to be very obvious to our leadership from all the commitments which were taken. If it is so obvious, why our governments didn't take bold steps to have them adopted and used?
The issue of prioritization, and by the way, the reforms I referred to, one issue was to say we will better deliver if we can identify where do we put our limited resources. The resources will always be limited, yes, and you can't spread them too thinly. But in that process, the issue becomes how do you ensure agility in the system and resilience so that you are able to adapt, having identified where do you start? Yes. What is the most limiting issue? And you can look at this from two angles, which usually talk about the supply side, the interventions. But you can also prioritize from the demand side. And actually, this demand side is more compelling and is more politically acceptable, more or less. And what I would say is three things come up as priorities today for most of our governments, all our governments. Number one is, of course, food security. Whatever you do in terms of interventions should be meeting the need to have not just food, but decent, nutritious food. That is cardinal, because that element is going to impact on everything else, on health, on education, on general well-being, etc., etc. The second one, related to food security, is employment. And I'm sure you can accept that this is the thing that is making our politicians sleepless nights, yes, especially for the youth. So our agriculture, in terms of priority, has to respond to the issue of employment, issue of entrepreneurship. And the third one, related to what you mentioned, is how do we produce sustainably? And I talk about the complete value chain, the food system, is production, is processing, is packaging and consumption. So that all value.
How do we bring in the private sector, private investment to come and fuel a bit those research, adoption and adaptation of research first, and then adoption and use, and later he talked about agro-processing, and then come do agro-processing, add value, and then open the market. This is a way of sustaining. How do we bring the private sector in this?
When you look at successful examples, more recently you find a lot of success in Malawi, for instance, in Kenya as well, on the back of e-commerce platforms in other countries. And these are farmers getting to more commercial entrepreneurship because they're being enabled by digital technologies. And both in terms of financial services, but also access to information, both marketing and trading information. So that in itself is what is making it happen. So in terms of how do we accelerate that and how do we expand that, this is where actually the question comes in terms of building more engagement and promotion at the level of both policy, as well as in the continent in Africa, we have the whole issue of transnational and regional value chains. So those are actually huge enablers in terms of the size of markets. And what I'm speaking to is your question about private sector, because the whole system essentially has to be seen from a business perspective.
We need to work in a way, in such a way, private sector feels that agriculture can have some business prospects.
And it has.
And it has. And so that they can invest in agriculture and the whole value chain to have it sustainable. How do you see the coming in of science and what Africa should take as a direction and prioritization of science and technology during, let's say, the next decades?
I'm actually spoiled for choice because there is this talk the convergence of knowledge, be it biological, physical, socioeconomic, and they are talking that this is actually, it's already manifesting itself in form of what will be the fourth industrial revolution. We have internet, big data, whatnot. So there are so many things in there. But we started on the platform of agriculture, which you articulated very well as the foundation of economic development in Africa. So if I can keep that script, I think that what I think could drive African agriculture would be something, if I can simplify this, something that would start with quality seed to be planted. This would be a product from science and technology, quality seed. And when you get the seed, it's planted in the soil. So we need technologies that can help revamp our already declined fertility, soil fertility in Africa. And if you have the seed, you have addressed the soil, then the crop will grow. You have addressed production, but you will not stop there with production. The policy comes in, market end, and so on.
Very, very good. Colleagues, let's now conclude.
The issue of agriculture transformation for Africa is an imperative, is urgent. It's like sometimes we say food security is a priority. Food security cannot be a priority. Food security is life. You can't decide today is not a priority.
We are all in agreement that transformation is what Africa needs. And the key drivers of transformation are two things. Technological interventions that will be groundbreaking, that will transform agriculture from the way we are doing it, and we talked about that in details. But that will have to be twinned with political solutions. And I don't talk about politics here, I mean actually the enabling environment, encompassing policies, regulations, markets, institutions, all other enablers that need to align to make agriculture transform into an enterprise rather than the hobby we have all traditionally known it to be.
Ladies and gentlemen, viewers, let me invite you to the next Kikao as I thank Martin and Francis for your contribution. Thank you very much.
And now to our science terminology of the week. That's on Science Speak. Now the word for the week is DNA. That is usually an abbreviation of deoxyribonucleic acid. And this is a molecule inside the cell that contains the genetic information responsible for the development and function of an organism. These molecules allow the genetic information to be passed from one generation to the next. It's actually the reason why you look like your mother or your father. Yes, so the verdict is out. Science, technology, and innovation are all necessary ingredients in developing and improving Africa's agriculture. But progress will have to be faster. Until next time, my name is Joe Agale. Thanks for watching Kikao.